Hey everyone, welcome to episode 100 of the Conscious Podcast. I can't believe we got to 100. I remember starting my very first episode and being like, hey, if I get past 3, this is gonna be a good thing. And then I got past 10, then I got past 20, then I got to 50 and I'm like, wow, I could make a career out of this and I could actually do something with this. And I started meeting so many different people and amazing people, becoming friends with them. And everything just kept expanding and growing, and it's led me to where I am now, almost 3 years later. So 3 years ago, I got my first bit of gear. I joined up to a hosting site and I started recording podcasts. And this episode is really special because it's going to be a solo episode, which I haven't done for a while, but it's going to also be me going through why I started, how I started, what's come of this. I'm also going to overview a few of the podcasts. I would love to go through all 95 guests, but this would be a 5-hour long podcast. So I'm just going to go through 4 of my favorite, as well as share the story and also highlight some of the key things that I got from recording the Conscious Podcast over the years. Most of the guests that I had on the podcast were friends, and then some were randoms that I met on Instagram and became really good friends. And then also I had so many people reach out to me, which I am so grateful for, that also wanted to be on, or their PR team were reaching out to me. And I got to interview some incredible people from around the world. Some of those people are thought leaders, parents, entrepreneurs, energy psychologists, health experts, athletes, coaches, doctors, speakers, TV personalities, entrepreneurs, spiritual teachers, and more. I can't believe I've had some of the guests on here because some of these people were in my top 10 list to all-time interview in my life. And I got to do it within 100 episodes, which is super special for me. But I want to start by saying thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on an audio platform or listening to the podcast, thank you so much. Like, for me, this wouldn't really have continued if you didn't listen to it. If I just had my friends and family listen, I still would do this. I love it so much. But with you guys and your support, your ratings, your reviews, your shares, all the views and downloads, for me, make this so worthwhile. And then the comments of you guys reaching out, whether it's in the Conscious Collective or on Instagram, a DM, or on Facebook, it means so much to me to hear that you get value from these podcasts. And that's why I started. It was to share these conversations that I was having with people, them overcoming their adversity, them overcoming their most challenging times, and them taking action on what they wanted in life and creating amazing results in their life. And I knew by sharing that, you would also be inspired to do the same. So some of the topics that we covered in these podcasts ranged from mindset, health set, spirituality, wellness, health, business, overcoming challenges and adversity, tools, tips, and wisdom, awareness, and insights to raise your being and become more conscious in your daily life. But where did I start all of this? And I get asked this all the time, whether I'm speaking on stages or in general conversation with people. Why, where, how, and why did you start a podcast? So back 3 years ago, I was working a job I didn't really like. Hands up or click like if, or comment below if that's you. And for me, it was just working that job, but I knew I had a higher purpose. I knew there was something else I could be doing that I enjoy. And I was listening to a podcast with Joel Brown. And Joel was a mentor of mine and someone I looked up to. I loved his page, Addicted to Success. And from there, I remember him saying on a podcast, if you want to find your purpose, do this. Number 1, write down all the things that you love, that you have a passion for, that you enjoy doing. Probably spend the most time and money on in your day or in your week or in your year. So I wrote down all the things that I loved. There were things like I loved being in team sports, I loved being around friends, coffee catch-ups, traveling, learning, growing, connecting, being around people, but also my own personal growth. And then from there, the next part, step 2, is to then write down all the things you're naturally good at. your skills, your abilities, the things that you do very well, but you probably don't notice. It could be organizing something, it could be cleaning your car really well, it could be you're really good at learning things from starting from nothing, that you're really good at YouTubing things, maybe you're good at photography or videography. And I wrote down things that I was naturally really good at. I thought I was really good at organizing things. I was naturally good at learning things really quickly, like video and editing and audio and all that sort of stuff. I thought that I was really good at studying and getting information, learning myself, and then reciprocating that to someone else as a lesson, as a teaching. And for me in my life, it was also, I think that for me, one of my biggest skills in my life has been being able to sit down with someone, have a coffee or catch up, and in that space of sitting down, we become best friends after one conversation. And that to me was the ability to hold space. I knew that a lot of people came to me with either their problems or just wanted to have a chat. And for me, it was like, I just love learning about people. I love having that conversation and learning where they've come from, their mindset, their perspective, what they've overcome in their life. And that to me was inspiring. So I had my list of things that I loved and was really, that I enjoyed doing. And then I had that list of the things that I was naturally good at. And then the third step is to create a list of how you can serve the world by mixing things from the step 1 and step 2 together. So I thought about it and I'm like, okay, I could maybe be a leader or a coach of a soccer team or a sporting team. I thought I could host events or run events, and none of them really stood out to me. And here's the thing, with this third part that we do in finding your purpose or something purposeful to do, you don't look at the money aspect, how much money it's going to make you. This is something that you would do because it's a passion. You'd put your time and money into because you would enjoy it, because of the fulfillment, because of how it would make you feel, and because of the service you could provide to someone else. So for me, I sat there and I went, I love podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I love going to seminars. What if I could interview my friends and the people that I've met on my journey and share their tools and wisdom and their life lessons with other people? Then I don't have to sit with 500 people and tell them the same thing. I can create one conversation and let everyone hear it. And that's how the Conscious Podcast basically formed. Well, the idea of starting a podcast. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what it would turn into. But from there, I felt, you know what, if someone gets something out of this podcast, it'll be so worth it in the end. So my next step was to figure out how to start a podcast. Now, luckily for me, I listened to a lot of Lewis Howes, and he actually did a video on YouTube on how to start a podcast, what gear to use. Now, he was one of my favorite podcasts at the time. So I thought, I'm just gonna get what he has because it must be good. So I spent, I think it was about $1,000 getting the right gear, the right headsets. I wanted the headsets that went over back in the old days, over your ear, and also had a boom mic here so that I could record anywhere. The problem with having certain mics with arms and stuff like that, you couldn't go to a cafe because it'd be so much to set up. You had to be in a studio. With those headsets, with the boom mic, I was able to travel with it. I wanted something that was portable. I loved traveling. I knew I was going to be traveling overseas and also around Australia. So for me, it had to be portable. It had to work with my laptop. I had a MacBook at the time, and I just needed a preamp that could have both of those going in. Not a USB mic or anything that was kind of unreliable. I needed something good. So I started with the Audio-Technica Boom headsets. I'll link them below as well. They are amazing. I still use them, especially in a setting where maybe I'm in an airport, or maybe I'm in a cafe, or maybe I'm in a car with someone and it has quality audio. Then I got the Focusrite preamp. Now you can choose one that suits you. That is so portable, it plugs straight into my MacBook. And for me, it allowed me to be portable and anywhere when I was doing this podcast. I've recorded some of these podcasts in Bali. I've recorded some of these podcasts near the beach, in a car, in my van, at cafes, at a busy Starbucks in Sydney where there was so many people, but because of those headsets, it still worked and it sounded really, really good. So with having the podcast as my purpose thing to start doing, I started doing it. I interviewed my closest friends, and trust me, if you listen back at number 1 with James Flack, honestly, it's hilarious. We didn't know how to keep that conversation. I was stuttering on my words. I didn't know how to keep a flow of conversation, and after everything he said, I was like, yep, yep. And I was also saying all the way through it. Now, at the start, of course, that's going to be like that. You have to start somewhere. Start where you are with what you have, and then start moving forward. And over time, you're going to get better. Now, when I started, I didn't know all this stuff. I didn't know how to use all the gear. I didn't know how to keep conversation flowing or to have a conversation that was good for a podcast and start asking those deep questions. But over time, I developed my skills. So from there, I started developing my skills. I started interviewing friends. And one thing for me that was really important was sound quality. With those headsets, I knew that I only wanted to do podcasts one-to-one, because that connection with someone sitting opposite you is where the energy comes from. That's where I get to see someone and really build a relationship with. So if you look at the videos from the podcast, most of them, and most of the ones that you listened to at the start where I didn't have a camera, were face to face. I had to meet those people in person. Now, this came in a blessing for me, because when I got asked to interview people like Dr. John Demartini, they were like, let's just do it online. And I was like, no, I don't do them online. I don't do Zoom calls. It has to be in person. I will meet him wherever he's going to be. I will travel 6 hours from Mildura to Melbourne to do it if that's what it takes to sit down with him. And they were like, well, okay. So I got to go up to Dr. John Demartini's hotel room, and this has happened at multiple guests. And for me, that was really special because I got to sit with the guy. I got to sit with the guest and build that relationship. That's different when you're on a screen. You're in a different place. They're probably at their home or their office. I got to sit in people's hotel rooms and then before and after have conversations and chat. And those are the times where I got to ask personal questions. I got to ask more in-depth questions. They basically coached me and gave me advice for free because I was interviewing them and we had such a great conversation. Now, that wasn't always the case. And this year when COVID hit and no one was allowed to travel anywhere, I had to adapt. Now, this was hard for me. It was something I didn't want to let go of. I wanted every interview to be in person, the quality to be top notch, but I had to adapt. So what that did, again, a blessing in disguise, I adapted in that moment so that I could keep the podcast thriving. It meant that I could open up the podcast to anyone around the world. I could interview some of my friends in Canada, America, Bali, Europe, wherever it may be, because we were doing it through Zoom. Now, I would still love to do it in person, and I think continuing on, I will do it in person, but it was still amazing to interview those people and continue the podcast going into episode 100. I don't think the quality was lost at all. I think just the quality in the connection between me and the guest was the only thing that was lacking, but that was due to the pandemic and we can't travel. So that was it. One of my favorite things about the podcast was it started as this very amateur, like obviously I had no idea what I'm doing. I didn't have professional recording experience. I didn't even have a camera. The camera came in when I started to speak on stage. Now, when I started podcasting, I had this dream of speaking on stages. I had this dream of mentoring, running events, all of those things. And from starting the podcast, it started to evolve. It started to grow. I started to get an audience base where you guys were listening, and I created the Instagram page and I was putting up little previews and tiles of like who the guest is and a quote and all that type of stuff. And it gained a lot of traction, it gained a lot of interest and a lot of followers in there. And I was like, well, one of my key values is connection and community. Why don't I bring everyone to a Facebook group and I can share more? I can get the guests to do like a exclusive sort of preview or exclusive masterclass or whatever it may be. So that's what I started to do. So from the podcast, I then created the Facebook group, The Conscious Collective, and started adding in the listeners. And the guests started coming in and also adding their friends in. And we would run free sessions on like mindset, relationships, business, money, accounting, whatever it may be. Whatever we talked about in the podcast, if I heard something that was like, wow, I want to delve deeper into that and also share that with more people, we would bring them on and we would do that. And that was where a lot of extra value was coming in. So you guys as a listener or a watcher or a viewer were able to connect with me. And that was what was really special for me, was actually connecting with people that listen to these podcasts, these interviews. Because for me, I love it. And if no one else listened to it, awesome. I'd still get to have that conversation with that person. But if someone else is listening to it and they gain some bit of value or wisdom that helps them change something in their life to then improve their life, man, I've done my job of service, because I know all these tools and information and wisdom was helping me grow. All this information was coming in and I was starting to up level myself and grow my personal development from there. From the Facebook group, we then started to host events. We started to host catch-ups where people would come together, would just have lunch together, because I was becoming friends with the speakers, with the guest speakers that would come onto the podcast, the people I was interviewing. And then from there, we started hosting little events around Melbourne, Mildura, Adelaide, because I was connecting with people that are like yoga teachers, meditation teachers, all of these things. And then from that, we then started to gain a bigger community. And I loved running those events. Like I said, my dream was to speak on stage. I created my dream. And from there, from doing those events, from interviewing these people, I then got asked to speak on stage myself. I got asked to speak on other podcasts. I got featured in different interviews, blogs, in the newspaper, all those types of things. And then I got asked to speak on stages. Now for me, being able to share a keynote on stage was like my ultimate dream. Now it was a fear back in the day in high school. I never liked speaking in front of people, but this was something different. To be able to speak on stage and to move a room and share my energy and wisdom is just an incredible thing in my mind, and a concept, a dream, and an intention that I really wanted in my life and really wanted to do, to be able to share with so many people from stage. And this provided that platform. Now those talks then turned into running certain events, being featured on different programs. I even got asked to be one of a guest speaker in a 3-week retreat in Thailand, which didn't actually end up happening, but it still opened those doors for me. And then also from there, it just kept developing. I kept interviewing people. I got offered jobs to be interviewer for different programs and different projects. I got asked to MC events. So you would have seen one of our podcast sponsors, Bloom. I got asked to speak at an event. I sat next to her. We shared our story. She turned to me and said, "Hey, love what you're doing. Do you do meditations?" And I was like, "Not really, but I can make them up. I would love to do that." And then from there, I became one of the first meditation teachers on the Bloom app, one of the most downloaded meditation apps in Australia at that time, #1 in iTunes, and is still thriving right now. So for me, I was so grateful for that opportunity, and it all came from the podcast. And then from there, working with that team, I then got asked to MC their big event back in February, and also the other event, and I got to share meditations, but also MC the whole day. Now for me, being able to do that, being able to move a room and inspire was such an incredible feeling for me, and I'm so grateful I got that opportunity. So thankful to the girls for offering that to me. But you see how me starting back 3 years ago, when I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how this is gonna work out, but I'm just gonna do it because it's fun and because it gives me so much joy, and I'm serving people. And if not, I'm serving myself in the process. So for me, going from that, it just kept expanding and growing. I then got asked by a lot of people, because I was sharing my wisdom and knowledge, "Hey, can you coach me? Can you mentor me? Do you have any programs?" And I was like, "Not really, but I can make something." And then that developed into 12 months ago, my Conscious Blueprint program, where I feature a lot of the guests that have been on the podcast, and we work together to cultivate this program to develop confidence, clarity, and connection within people. And it's been so impactful the past 12 months. I've ran 6 of those programs, and we've had over 60 people come in. So for me, look what it started with, and now where it's growing and who it's impacting. On the weekend, we just had our first virtual 2-day event. And for 2021, we have so many planned. We have a 12-month leadership program. And then on top of that, we've got an event every 3 months, as well as free events, catch-ups, and all of these things. Now, for me, I honestly did not expect it to go this way. But in doing that, I fulfilled my childhood dream to basically be David Beckham. Now, let me explain. For me, as a child playing soccer, I always wanted to be David Beckham. The looks, the modeling, the girls or the girl, the skills, all of those things. So I was like, look, I don't want to be, soccer was my old career, but in this field of what I do, I want to speak on stage. I want to be not one of the best, but one of the most impactful on stage. And from that dream, I was like, well, how can I bring those elements across here? Now I got to speak on stage. Now that's a great performance. That's in front of people, having a crowd of people. And I'm pretty sure at one of the events, it was 500 people at that event. So massive crowd for me, but it's not me and a team. It was me by myself, which was even more daunting. Then on top of that, the modeling. And you're probably like, well, how did you model in doing all this stuff? As the podcast grew, I got to about episode 50. Now, all of this was free. I was driving around. I actually bought a van to travel Australia and interview people along the way. And I did up the East Coast a couple of times, and that was amazing. But I was flying places, I was staying in hotels, all of that sort of stuff to interview people. It was all out of my pocket, all out of love, because I enjoyed it. I never got paid a cent up until that point. So when I got to about episode 50, I started having brands reach out to me. Now, I only collaborated with brands that were ones that aligned with me. And as you'll see the links below, I have links to all of them, and I'll talk about them after this story. But what I got offered was a lot of awesome free products, but I also got paid to have ads on the podcast. Now, I'm sitting there going, whoa, this is really cool. I'm getting paid to do something I love. Isn't that the ultimate dream? Now, at that point, where does the modeling come in? I got an underwear brand reached out to me called Bushy Underwear, and they're an Australian brand. It's made out of eucalyptus tencel, and they gave me a pack and they're like, hey, we want to run some ads as well. Can you do some modeling? So we done that, and that was such a fun process. And I was like, whoa, I fulfilled that dream of being an underwear model like David Beckham. It wasn't Armani, but it was an Australian brand, an eco-friendly brand. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm living that dream right now. It might not be on the football field, but it's in a field that I actually love and a field that I'm passionate about. And then all the other areas are happening. Things are growing. We have a merchandise range. The Conscious Collective, we have hoodies, tees, mugs, stickers, so many other things are coming in the new year as well. We have a whole merch range. And then on top of that, the programs. So for me, traveling with whatever I was doing, whether it was school camps or soccer trips, I wanted to bring that into the personal development space. So we started hosting retreats. We started hosting programs. We started hosting ceremonies out in different places around Australia. We actually had a Bali retreat and also a Costa Rica one planned that didn't happen because of COVID. But you see how I started to create a life, a career out of doing something I love. And that's where the podcast has led me to right now. So that's why it started, that's how it started, and that's how it's developed. Where will it go after 100? I am not sure, but if you keep in your lane and you keep doing the things you're passionate about and the things that you love, you never know where it's gonna take you. And I would rather bet on myself than bet on someone else. Go all in on the thing you want to do. Now, don't get me wrong, I did this on top of working a job, probably on top of working 2 jobs at a time. But for me, look where it's paid off now. 3 years later, I'm doing this full time. I'm running my programs full time. I'm speaking on stages, speaking on programs, and I'm doing something that is super purposeful and super fulfilling to me. What I wanted to do was share a couple of the episodes and share a little snippet for you as well. And I was thinking, look, I could get 10, but then this podcast would go for a long time. But there was really 4 that really stood out to me and really changed my direction as a human, but also as the podcast as well. So number 1 was Dr. John Demartini. I went to his event 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I was in the room watching him. It was the Gratitude Effect, and I sat there going, wow, I'd love to spend time with him. I would love to have a conversation with this guy. I got a photo at the end. I was full fangirling, and I was like, yeah, one day I'll be speaking on this stage next to you. And just feeling that and going, yeah. But I was also like, how am I going to do that? Especially when I wasn't doing any of this stuff. And when his team reached out to me, the PR team, I was fangirling crazy. I got nervous. I was like, man, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna dress? Do I wear a suit like Dr. Demartini? If you haven't seen him, he always wears a nice suit and tie. And I was like, I've got to drive up this day. I was in Mildura, I had to drive to Melbourne. So I was like, I'm gonna drive up the 6 hours and get straight there, set up 2 hours early in his hotel room and get it all done. And the PR team was like, you have to be in within 2 minutes. You've got 45 minutes and then 2 minutes to get out. So for me, it was like, oh damn, and then they were saying, oh, if you've got a film crew and all of that, you know, we have to know because we're gonna have them jotted down. And I'm like, I'm my film crew. I'm gonna have to hire one of my friends to do all the video stuff for me. So I got one of my friends, Tom, who actually edits my videos. He came in and it was for him, he was one of his mentors as well. So it was a really special moment. And that interview was like the first moment where, you know, when you look up to these people you idolize and you go, well, you shouldn't really put people on pedestals, but you're just like, whoa, I've read your work. I've seen your stuff. Now I'm getting to sit with you and ask you anything I want. For me, was a super special moment. And everything that Dr. John went through was super impactful. Now, don't get me wrong, it was nothing different, but I guess when I was sitting there with him, it just had a different specialness to it. And one of the biggest things he was talking about was your values. Now, if you're not living in accordance with your values, you're not gonna feel good, you're gonna feel off. But also, if other people are placing their expectations on you and you live in accordance to their values, you're not gonna feel good. And they're not gonna like it because they're like, well, you're not living, you should be living this way. It's an expectation of my values should be yours when everyone has unique values. And by going through the process of identifying your values, you can live in accordance with them and not have any expectations on any other people. So I'm gonna show a clip right now from that episode. There's so much value in all of this.
But going through that exercise and defining what it is that really your life is purely demonstrating spontaneously about what you're committed to and finding that out so you're not fighting yourself, trying to be somebody you're not, but honoring yourself and allowing yourself to be the magnificent being that you're spontaneously called to do based on what your values are. That to me is one of the most significant things a person can do. It's an old Delphic oracle, be thyself, know thyself, be thyself, love thyself. It's true. I don't look back with regrets. I don't think that there's ever a mistake. The only time I think there's a mistake in our life is when I compare my actions to somebody else's values that I've let infiltrate my thinking. And the only time I think other people make a mistake is when I project my values onto them and expect them to live my values. There's no mistakes in our own values. There's only mistakes when we cross value system. So I don't find that productive. I don't go walking around with regrets and look back, oh, I messed up here. I should have done this. Yep. I don't hear, in my head, there's not shoulds, ought tos, supposed tos, got tos, have tos, and musts. I don't live that way. Because I live by priority. I know my values. I stick to those. I find them more productive.
And if you were to do that, you're taking away the power that you have now to then create the life that you want, because you're bringing that with you.
You're living deontologically by duty of other people and giving accountabilities to others to direct your life. The voice and the vision on the inside's got to be louder than opinions on the outside if you want to master your life and make a difference in the world.
That was incredible. I loved it. Again, the first interview I had where it was at a hotel room, where it was through a PR agency, and it was like proper, like big time. I've made it. Dr. John Demartini was on my list of top 10 people to interview. So that was incredible for me. Number 2 was Dr. Dain Heer. Now, I had never heard of Dr. Dain Heer, but again, PR team reached out to me and I was like, whoa, this guy is the co-founder of Access Consciousness. What better person to have on the Conscious podcast than a guy that runs an event and a company called Access Consciousness? And this conversation opened my mind to consciousness. Now, the Conscious Podcast, the name was formed basically by me looking up and going, I want to share awareness. But awareness with Carlo or the awareness podcast just didn't really ring with me. And then I found consciousness. I couldn't spell it at the start, but and a lot of people can't. That's why they can't find the podcast or struggle to. Conscious is a difficult word to spell. But I seen C&C, so Conscious Carlo, the Conscious Podcast with Carlo. It just had a nice ring to it. That's how it started. I didn't really actually understand what consciousness was. I just knew that it was awareness. So this interview with Dr. Dain really opened my mind, changed my perspective on it, but also gave me so much wisdom on how to release judgment and also come from a place of consciousness and not from a place of being someone else or trying to be something else to please other people. So check out this clip from that episode.
So what I'm intrigued to know is, what is consciousness to you?
Well, for me, consciousness is where everything and everyone exists and no one and nothing is judged. And what that allows by extension is every possibility that exists. Because it's our judgments, it's what we decide is right or wrong, good or bad, what we can have, what we can't, that create our reality. You know, and the way I say it is your point of view creates your reality. Reality does not create your point of view. If you can get over your point of view about how reality is supposed to be, how magical could it be that you don't even know yet?
So why do you think that right now some people can't get over that point of view? Is it they haven't tapped into that consciousness, or is it society? Is it marketing? Is it the news? Is it what do you think that is?
All of that.
Yeah.
I really do. And my sense is we've just never been taught that it's possible and it's actually the way things work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got this really sort of skewed idea of what is going to make us happy. And most of that has nothing to do with us. It's what we're taught from the time we're little kids that was supposed to make other people happy, but it didn't make them happy, but we're supposed to somehow do it better and get happy as a result. Are you friggin' kidding me?
So true.
Where do we buy this crap? You know what I mean? And so we haven't been given some really fundamental tools.
Mm-hmm.
And from my point of view, one of those fundamental tools is what's true for you will always make you lighter. A lie for you always makes you heavier. And so what I see is people trying to live things that are not true for them, trying to make entire lives out of what's not true for them. And it's never light, but they think they're wrong somehow because it feels so wonky and so off, rather than realizing maybe what I'm going for, maybe it's not wrong, but maybe it's just not for me.
Yeah.
You know, and if we apply that to, you know, we could apply it to relationships, we could apply it to stuff with our family, we apply it to stuff with the future we want to create. And we don't have some of the basic tools that would make it a lot easier.
Next, we have the man himself, Joel Brown, the founder of Addicted to Success. Now, as I was telling you from the story right at the start, that he was the guy that shared that process on a podcast that inspired me to do what I was doing. That then led me to meet someone. I actually interviewed someone on the podcast, Adriana. She was working at his retreat and event in Bali, and she said, man, you have to come. And for me, it was not in their financial plans. I had no money at that time, but she's like, you need to be there. And I went, you know what? If I go and I see him and I go to his event, surely afterwards he'd want to be on the podcast or would be open to being on the podcast. Not only did I get to connect and meet a guy that was one of my mentors virtually through podcasts, books, whatever it may be, I got to meet so many others at that event who I'm now really good friends with or business partners with, or that have also come on the podcast. There was so much wisdom throughout this whole episode, so here's a few clips for you to check it out.
Because there's two worlds that exist within us, the aware and the unaware. And there's this like whole conversation of like self-sabotage. Self-sabotage doesn't exist, bro. You know why? Because you're always getting what you want. It's just the question of which part of me is getting what I want, the unaware or the aware. The unaware is the unconscious, the aware is the conscious. I believe that everyone consciously wants a great life. The unaware, unconscious part of you has a different story going on. And so that's where we do the work. That's where we dive in. That's where we work out, you know, what are the stories you're telling yourself on a consistent basis, right? What are you getting from it? What's the payoff? What's the cost? Now it's like, what do we do to change? What new things do we implement? You need to shift your identity. Because if your identity is still the old identity of you from years ago and you're trying to create something new, you'll never get there. In order to create a new identity, we need to come out of our comfort zone, because our comfort zone is our current identity. You have to get uncomfortable. You get to get uncomfortable. That's how this works. There's no other way around it. People will try and walk and talk and act and pretend and fake it till you make it and all that other BS. It doesn't work. Don't give up. It sounds so simple, but it's a willingness within you to make sure along the way that you're not bullshitting yourself, that you're staying in alignment with your dreams and your values and your vision. Because if you're not, if you're doing things for the approval of others, if you're saying yes to the things you really want to say no to, if you're betraying yourself, if you're doing it because you're comparing yourself to somebody else's success, I call it chasing freaking unicorns. It's like that it doesn't exist. It's not your definition of success. You haven't defined it for yourself. You haven't committed to it. And so many people are stuck in what I call the paper prison. They surround themselves so much with all this money. It's like, it's about the money, 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 money. I got to get the money, that they trap themselves in that story, not knowing it's so easy to just break out and break through it. But they're in it and they're trapping themselves in it. And their whole world is like a need to make the money. And then they're so blinded and they don't see what life is really about. They're totally missing the point.
The last episode that I want to share with you is the episode with Johnny Pollard. Now, Johnny is a spiritual teacher, but also the co-founder of One Giant Mind meditation group. Now, for me, I've heard about Johnny for so long. I've read his book. 2 years ago, I reached out to him and I got no response. Now, that isn't to his fault. It probably went in his other folder, or he probably doesn't check his Instagram, whatever it may be. But when I got to kind of 90 episodes, I started reaching out to my friends and saying, hey, who's someone that you really look up to that you'd love to be on the podcast? And I kept getting Johnny Pollard, Johnny Pollard, Johnny Pollard. So I reached out to him, but I also got my friend to get his email, because at least I could directly interview him. And we had a chat and it was amazing. It was a virtual conversation, but at the same time, he taught me a lot about belonging, about coming to that place of belonging, of being. What is that place of being? And what is that familiar place that we've always been, that we've been trying to run from for so long? And that's what, through meditation, you're able to get back to that place of being. I'll let him explain a bit more in these short clips, so check it out.
For most people that are feeling insecure, unsafe, mistrusting, unsure of their place in the world, insecure in their belonging, when belonging is actually one of the most primary aspects of our humanity in order to feel healthy and well and to flourish, we will compromise our sensibility, our inner sensibility of what we believe is true and right in order to belong to something that is not true, just for the sake of belonging. And so in our pursuit for belonging to something that is not really, truly representative of our spirit, we, one, compromise our precious time and energy cultivating a true and lasting relationship with ourselves in order to belong to something that isn't true and lasting. And in our pursuit for wanting to belong, we become distracted and completely immersed in a reality that is trivial and toxic. Belonging it's our nature. You can't take belonging away. We just ignore it. And therefore, belonging is our social responsibility. Nurturing belonging, awakening belonging, noticing belonging, the truth, that is always there. We can't separate ourselves from that reality. We can only pretend that we are, and look what it creates. Look at the world we're living in. It's because of this one single thing, that we choose to ignore our belonging. Why? Is what you were getting at. Because the place where our belonging is experienced is in the same place that we hold the feelings of the trauma of our past. It's very painful to sit in that place if we haven't addressed the unresolved past. And so we avoid going back into the past and compromise our ability to know ourselves. And so we seek to find ourselves outside of ourselves because going inward is too painful. Everyone always reports when they awaken to the truth of self, oh, it's the most familiar place. Yes, because it's you. It's always been there. It's just that you've been ignoring it. And so when we have that experience, we change the word reconnect or connect to simply awaken to or notice. We just notice it. We notice that it's there. We cease ignoring it and we become it, rather than look at it as something that is objective to ourselves or separate from ourselves. We just become it. There is a merger that takes place. We become ourselves. When we become ourselves, the experience is that there is no disconnection. That paradigm ceases to exist because it's only an intellectual paradigm. It's only a bunch of ideas. When we have the experience ourselves, the ideas about who we are disappear. We don't need to uphold ideas. I am this and I am that, conceptually. We just become it.
So those were just 4 incredible episodes, but I'm telling you, there's 99 other incredible episodes on the podcast. You can go check all of them out on any podcast streaming app, on YouTube as well, for the ones that were filmed. But Also on top of that, I asked a poll on Instagram last week, what questions would you like me to answer? So I've got 5 quick fire questions for you to end this episode. Number 1, what was your favorite episode? Now that for me is like picking your favorite child. I don't think I have one. I like so many, but I think the one that was really, really, really special to me was probably the Dr. John Demartini or the Joel Brown, because I had looked up to them for so long, and to meet them in the flesh was just incredible. Number 2, what was your biggest lesson? I think I shared it before, but it was all about those values, on getting really clear on your values and releasing expectation and judgment. Because then you get into a place where, or a place of being, of what is possible. What else is possible from a place of no judgment of yourself, of others, and also probably the definition of consciousness that Dr. Dane here gave. Consciousness is where everyone and everything exists and no one and nothing is judged. Number 3, what did you learn about yourself? For me, I learned that I can overcome something I set my mind to. I can literally start from having no experience, and I can work on something, enjoy it, and not have to do it for money. But hey, if it turns into money, it can probably turn into something that's incredible. And I learned that you don't have to do just one thing. You can do many things that fall under your umbrella. So the Conscious Collective, like I said, we do merch, events, retreats, podcasts, all of the things. And you can build that from basically a passion, mixing that with a skill, and serving the world in that way. So for me, that was so fulfilling. And I think I learned that about myself, that I could do it and that I could grow and that I could achieve the dreams that I had set out for myself. Number 4, would you have changed anything about the podcast? Honestly, no. I think everything happened exactly the way it should. The only thing I would have loved is to interview the last few episodes that had to be via Zoom, virtually because of COVID. I would have loved to have done them in person, but apart from that, I loved it so much. Number 5, what was your favorite part about having a podcast? I think meeting new people, connecting with like-minded people, creating a community, but also being able to travel and create a business and a lifestyle doing something I loved. You go into hotel rooms and you set up the cameras and the lights and stuff, and people go, wow, what's happening? You're almost treated like a celebrity. So for me, it's opened a lot of doors, it's opened a lot of connections. And I think for me, I get to do something I love every single day. And this honestly does not feel like work. It's a hobby, it's a passion, it's a love for me. So with it being episode 100, I have some news for you. But first, I want to say thank you so much for all your support and everything you've provided and shared and commented on and listened to and left a review, all of those things. You have been a driving force for me. Your comments, your inspiration, how it's changed your life has inspired me to keep going, keep raising the bar and keep getting guests that would provide more value. Now, for me, I can't thank you enough. Hopefully through having that community, you can come in there and get a lot more value as well. But just your time, your energy, and your attention to listen to someone for an hour, even though I guess it's not me, I'm kind of the interviewer, but to listen to that, like I can't express how grateful and thankful I am to you. I am honestly just in a state of bliss and fulfillment because I get to do something that I love. And I want to share that with you, and I want you to be able to step into that. I want you to be able to follow your dreams and start where you are with what you have and create an incredible life for yourself. So at any point, if you want to reach out to me, if you don't already have me on Instagram, Carlo_Cirillo, all links will be in the show notes below. Reach out, connect with me. I would love to help you. That's my way of paying back the favor of you giving your time and attention, and any other comments would be amazing. But my big news is I will be launching another podcast. This will be personally branded the Carlo Cirillo Podcast, and it will open up the door to interview the same people again in a different format, more longer form, but also on different topics. I think the Conscious Podcast will continue, possibly in the new year. but it kind of doesn't leave room for me to get the same guest back on. So another podcast will be running. So keep up to date with everything on my Instagram. I will be announcing it everywhere. That for me is an intention. I'm setting it out there. If it happens, that's a different story, but I'm putting it out there, and it's something I would love to do, to get the same guests back on, go deeper, but also interview more people and do more of what I love. So again, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. And here's a few notes from our sponsors from the year that have provided so much goodness, that have also provided value and income for me, but also product for me and for yourself to improve your daily life. Conscious products from Conscious Brands. So make sure you stick around and check those out. And so grateful for them, so grateful for you. Thank you so much for joining me. I have so much love for you, and I can't wait to see you on the next episodes of this, another, whatever it may be, and I can't wait to connect with you. Peace.